The scent of burning sage filled the night air as Lyra Vale stood at the edge of the stone circle. Her white dress fluttered in the cold breeze, her hands trembling as she tried to hide them behind her back. The entire pack had gathered to watch, 20 faces, 20 pairs of eyes, all waiting for the same thing, her humiliation. The fertility ritual was supposed to be a celebration for the Omegas before mating season. Each year, the elders blessed them with red ochre across the forehead, a mark of fertility, a promise from the moon goddess. But Lyra had stood in this circle 3 times before and walked away each time without the mark. This would be the 4th. Lyra Vale, Elder Mora called, her voice dry as dust. Step forward. Lyra swallowed the lump in her throat and obeyed. The stones beneath her bare feet were cold, sharp. She stopped in the center of the circle and kept her gaze low. The murmurs started immediately. There she is again. Why does she even bother? She'll never be blessed. Each whisper cut her like a blade. She tried to steady her breathing, focusing on the pendant at her neck, a small silver moon, her mother's last gift. Light always returns, her mother had said before she died. Lyra had clung to those words like a prayer, even as the world forgot her. Elder Mora lifted a bowl of red ochre. The moon goddess blesses those who carry life within their hearts, she said loudly. Then her eyes fell on Lyra, pitying and cold. But some hearts are cursed to remain empty. A wave of laughter rippled through the crowd. Lyra's hands tightened around the pendant. I am not cursed, she whispered. What was that? Mora asked sharply. Lyra looked up. Her grey eyes gleamed faintly in the torchlight. I said I am not cursed, she repeated, louder this time. The crowd gasped. An Omega speaking back to an elder, unforgivable. Elder Mora's mouth twisted. The healers tested you. Your womb is silent. The goddess herself has judged you unworthy. You will accept your fate, Lyra Vale, or be cast from the pack. Lyra's jaw tightened, but she said nothing more. The ceremony continued without her blessing. The other Omegas were marked one by one, their foreheads glowing red in the firelight. When it was over, she stood alone in the circle, unmarked, unwanted, invisible again. The crowd began to disperse. Lyra turned to leave, but movement near the trees caught her eye. A tall man stood half hidden in shadow, watching her. He wore a dark cloak, and though the firelight barely reached him, she could see his eyes, bright amber, almost glowing. Their gazes locked for a heartbeat. She felt something stir deep inside her, something that made her skin prickle and her wolf stir in confusion. Then the man turned and disappeared into the forest. Lyra called a familiar voice. It was Myra, her only friend, running toward her with concern on her face. Don't listen to them. They don't know anything. Lyra forced a weak smile. I'm fine. Myra frowned. No, you're not. Let's skip the feast tonight. We'll go to the hot springs instead. You need to breathe. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. All right. They slipped away from the pack grounds, following the moonlit path through the forest. The feast drums faded behind them. The night was quiet except for the rustle of leaves and their soft footsteps. Myra glanced sideways at her. Did you see him? The man watching you? Lyra nodded slowly. Yes. Who was he? They say King Kale Draven is visiting the border packs, Myra said in a hushed tone. Maybe it was him. Lyra frowned. The Alpha King? Here. Why would he come to a small pack like ours? Maybe he's looking for a mate, Myra teased, bumping her shoulder. Imagine you, the Barren Omega, catching the king's eye. Lyra laughed softly, but the sound didn't reach her eyes. Don't be ridiculous. They reached the hot springs. Steam rose in silver ribbons, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Lyra slipped off her dress and sank into the warm water, sighing as the heat wrapped around her aching body. For a while, she felt peace. Myra tilted her head back, looking at the sky. You know, Lyra. I think the goddess made you different for a reason. Maybe your path isn't about bearing pups. Maybe it's something greater. Lyra smiled sadly. Maybe. A twig snapped in the woods. Both women froze. Did you hear that? Lyra whispered. Myra scanned the trees. Probably a deer. But the forest had gone still. No wind. No insects. Just silence. Then a shadow moved. From the darkness, the man from the ritual stepped into the clearing. The torchlight from the nearby path caught his face, strong, striking, with eyes that gleamed like molten amber. His presence filled the space, commanding and dangerous. Myra gasped and lowered her gaze. "Your Majesty." Lyra's heart pounded. The Alpha King. So the rumors were true. Cale Draven's eyes never left hers. "Leave us," he said quietly, his voice deep and resonant. Myra looked at Lyra, torn, but Lyra nodded. "It's all right. I'll be fine." When Myra was gone, Cale stepped closer to the spring's edge. "You are the healer," he said. "The one they call Barren." Lyra flinched. "That's what they say." His gaze swept over her, not with lust but with something sharper, curiosity, maybe even recognition. "And what do you say?" Lyra met his eyes. "I say they're wrong." A faint smile touched his lips. "Good. The cursed should never believe their chains are real." Before she could answer, he reached out and brushed his fingers against her pendant. The silver moon shimmered faintly under his touch. "Keep that close," he murmured. "You'll need it soon." Then, without another word, he turned and vanished into the trees, leaving her trembling in the warm water, unsure if the whole encounter had been a dream. Lyra woke late the next morning, her mind foggy from restless dreams. The image of the Alpha King's eyes lingered behind her eyelids, gold and fierce, like sunlight through amber. Every time she blinked, she saw him watching her from the shadows. Shaking off the thought, she dressed and walked to the healer's hut. Her duties couldn't wait. The elders might call her barren, but they still needed her skills. The villagers respected her when they were sick and only then. Inside, bundles of herbs hung from the ceiling. The air smelled of mint, smoke, and earth. She was grinding fever root when a shadow fell across the doorway. She turned and nearly dropped the mortar. Cale Draven stood there. He looked different in daylight, taller, more regal, his presence filling the small room. He wore no crown, no armor, only a dark cloak trimmed with silver fur. Yet there was no mistaking who he was. "Your Majesty," Lyra stammered, bowing slightly. "Forgive me, I didn't." "Enough of that," Cale interrupted, stepping inside. "We're alone." Her heart raced. "Why are you here?" He looked around, eyes pausing on the herbs and charms hanging from the rafters. "You're a healer," he said softly. "You use herbs to mend wounds, yes. But there's power in your hands that no herb can match." Lyra frowned. "I don't understand." He turned to face her fully. "When you touched the spring water last night, the surface shimmered silver. Did you notice? I thought it was the moonlight." "It wasn't," he said. "It was you." Lyra took a step back. "You must be mistaken. I'm no one special." Cale's expression softened slightly. "No one special does not make the moon bend toward them, Lyra Vale." Silence filled the small hut. Lyra's mind spun. "Why are you telling me this?" He reached into his cloak and drew out a small object, a seed, black as night, but glowing faintly along its veins. He placed it gently on the table between them. "This is from the Silver Grove," he said. "A relic older than the packs themselves. Plant it tonight, under the waning moon. Water it with 3 drops of your blood." Lyra stared at it. "Why would I do that?" "Because it will show you the truth of what you are," Cale said simply. "And what am I?" she whispered. His amber eyes met hers. Something the world thought extinct. Before she could ask more, a sound echoed outside, the sharp cry of a messenger hawk. Cale glanced toward the window, his jaw tightening. "My guards are calling. I must go." "Wait," she said quickly. "What happens if I plant it?" His gaze lingered on her face, almost tender. "Then your curse will finally have a name." He turned toward the door. Lyra's voice stopped him. "Why me? Why do you care?" Cale looked back. For a heartbeat, something raw flickered in his eyes, grief, longing, something ancient. "Because I've seen you before," he said. "In dreams." Then he was gone. Lyra stood frozen, staring at the seed. It pulsed faintly on the table, as if breathing. She reached out but stopped short of touching it. The air around it felt warm, alive. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Villagers came and went, a child with a burn, an old man with a cough, but Lyra's thoughts never left the seed or the Alpha King's words. By nightfall, she could no longer resist. Outside, the forest was silent beneath a thin slice of moon. She carried a small clay pot to the garden behind her hut, filled it with soil, and set the seed inside. 3 drops of blood, she murmured. She pricked her finger with a thorn, watching as the crimson drops fell onto the dark earth. The ground shimmered faintly. She felt a pulse, not from the soil, but from herself, echoing deep in her chest. "Show me," she whispered. "Show me what I am." The wind shifted. A cool, silvery glow spread from the pot, spiraling upward like mist. The leaves of nearby plants turned toward it as though in worship. Lyra stepped back, heart pounding. Then it was over. The glow faded, and the garden was quiet again. She stared down at the pot. The soil was still. The seed buried. A wave of disappointment washed over her. "Nothing happened," she whispered. She sighed and turned to go inside. But as she reached the door, she heard it, a soft crack, like ice breaking. She spun around. From the center of the pot, a tiny shoot had pushed through the soil. It was silver. Lyra's breath caught. Impossible. The shoot trembled, unfurling 2 perfect leaves that glowed faintly under the moonlight. She knelt beside it, her hands shaking. When she touched one of the leaves, a rush of warmth surged through her body. Images flashed behind her eyes, forests made of silver trees, wolves howling under a full moon, and a woman with her face crowned in light. Lyra gasped and fell backward, the vision fading. The little plant swayed gently in the breeze, innocent, beautiful, impossible. Lyra looked up at the sky, her heart racing. "What are you doing to me, Kale Draven?" she whispered. Far above, the moon broke through the clouds, bathing her in light. For the first time in years, the air around her didn't feel empty. It hummed with something ancient, something awakening. And somewhere in the distant forest, the Alpha King lifted his head, his eyes glowing gold as he felt the pull of her power answering his own. The rain fell steadily that night, whispering against the roof of Lyra's small cottage. The wind carried the scent of pine and damp earth, familiar, comforting. She was sorting bundles of herbs by the hearth when she heard it, a low, pained growl outside. Her hands froze over the basket. Every instinct told her to stay inside, but the sound came again, weak, almost human this time. A man's voice. Lyra snatched her cloak from the peg and stepped out into the rain. The forest beyond her garden was a blur of silver and shadow, lit only by flashes of lightning. "Hello," she called softly. "Who's there?" No answer. Then, movement near the trees. She hurried forward, her feet splashing through puddles, until she saw him. A man, or rather, a mountain of one, lay slumped against a fallen log. His black cloak was torn, his chest streaked with blood. Even wounded, his presence made the air feel heavier, charged. His scent hit her like a storm, earth, smoke, and something wild that stirred her wolf. "By the goddess," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "You're hurt." He turned his head slightly. Amber eyes, glowing faintly even in the rain, met hers. There was power there, deep and dangerous, but dulled now by pain. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. "It's not safe." "I live here," Lyra said, slipping into healer's mode. "You're bleeding badly. I can help." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "Don't touch me." Lyra didn't flinch. "If I don't, you'll bleed out before sunrise." A long pause. The man's breathing was ragged. Then, slowly, he released her. She tore a strip from her cloak and pressed it to his wound. His blood was thick and dark, strangely luminous under the stormlight. As she worked, she murmured an old prayer, one her mother had taught her long ago. When she finished binding the wound, she helped him to his feet. He was half conscious, leaning heavily on her, but together they stumbled into her cottage. "Sit," she ordered, guiding him to the chair by the fire. "Don't move." His gaze followed her as she gathered herbs, mortar, and bandages. "You're a healer?" he asked, voice low. "I was," she said quietly. Now I'm just a Barren Omega who fixes everyone else's pain. Something flickered in his eyes, not pity, but curiosity. And yet you help a stranger in the woods. Lyra crushed Fever Root between her fingers, releasing its scent. A healer doesn't choose who to save. When she leaned close to apply the paste to his wound, his skin brushed hers, warm, electric. She gasped softly. For a second, light shimmered between them, faint and silvery. Then it vanished. He stared at her, sharp and alert now. What was that? I don't know, she stammered, stepping back. Her pulse raced. It must have been the herbs. He smirked faintly. Herbs don't make the air hum, healer. Before she could answer, exhaustion caught up to him. His eyes fluttered shut, and his head tilted back against the chair. Lyra hesitated, torn between fear and something else, something that drew her to him despite everything. She watched the firelight flicker across his face, strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, a faint scar near his temple. Even in rest, he looked dangerous, like a wolf barely caged. She whispered, "Who are you?" His lips curved faintly, though his eyes stayed closed. "No one you should save." Morning came quietly. The rain had stopped, leaving the forest wrapped in silver mist. Lyra stirred the embers and glanced at her patient. He was awake now, watching her. "You were feverish," she said. "I changed your bandage." He nodded once. "You have a steady hand." "I've had practice," she replied, avoiding his gaze. "What were you doing in these woods?" "We're far from the royal roads." He was silent for a long moment. "Hunting," he said finally. "For what?" He looked up, and for a moment she saw something wild and ancient in his eyes. "Answers." Lyra frowned. "That doesn't sound like something you kill." A ghost of a smile. "Sometimes it is." He rose slowly, testing his strength. When he moved, she noticed the faint outline of a tattoo along his ribs, a silver wolf surrounded by flames. Recognition jolted through her. "That mark," she whispered. "You're." He turned sharply. "Don't say it." Her breath caught. She had seen that mark only once before, on banners during the royal processions. The sigil of the Alpha King. "Your Majesty," she breathed. He sighed, the title sounding strange on her tongue. So much for disguise. Lyra stepped back, stunned. The man she had dragged through the mud and patched up with Fever Root was none other than Kael Draven, the Alpha King of the Seven Territories. Why would you be here, alone?" she stammered. "Because your pack lies on land older than the throne," he said quietly. "And because of you." "Me?" He turned to her, expression unreadable. "I saw you at the ritual, Lyra Vale. The Barren Omega who defied her elders and still stood proud beneath the moon. I felt something then. Power. Something I haven't felt in years." Her throat went dry. "You must be mistaken." "Am I?" he asked softly, stepping closer. "Tell me, healer, when you touched me last night, did you feel it too?" She wanted to deny it, but the memory of that spark still tingled on her skin. "I don't know what I felt." "Then we'll find out." He reached into his cloak and withdrew a small, black seed, no bigger than her thumbnail. It shimmered faintly, threads of silver running through it. "Plant this," he said. "Under the waning moon. Water it with 3 drops of your blood." Lyra stared at it. "That sounds like witchcraft." "Maybe it is." His tone softened. "Maybe it's truth." "What will it grow?" He held her gaze. "The truth about what you are." And before she could ask more, he was gone as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving only the faint scent of pine and smoke and a single silver-edged seed lying in her palm. That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. The storm had passed, but her mind was a storm of its own, of questions, of fear, of impossible hope. She sat by her window, turning the seed over and over between her fingers. It was warm, as though alive. Every time she tried to set it down, she felt it pulse faintly like a heartbeat. "What are you?" she thought. "And why me?" Outside, the moon was waning, just as the king had said. The forest was still, holding its breath. Finally, Lyra rose. She stepped barefoot into her garden. The air was cool and heavy with the scent of wet earth. She knelt beside the patch of soil where she grew healing herbs, the same ground her mother once tended. Her hands trembled as she dug a small hole. "This is foolish," she whispered. "Completely foolish." But she did it anyway. She placed the seed in the earth, pressed the soil over it, and pricked her finger with a thorn. 3 drops of blood fell, dark against the dirt. The moment the 3rd drop sank in, the ground shivered. Lyra gasped as light spread through the soil, soft, silver, and alive. The glow pulsed like a heartbeat, then faded, leaving only silence. She waited. 1 breath. 2. Nothing. Disappointment washed through her. "Of course," she muttered. "Just another cruel joke." She stood to leave and then froze. From the ground where the seed had vanished, a thin stem began to push upward, glowing faintly like moonlight on water. Within seconds, it unfurled into a tiny sprout with silver leaves that shimmered in the dark. Lyra dropped to her knees, heart pounding. Impossible. The little plant swayed gently, though there was no wind. When she reached out to touch a leaf, a rush of energy surged through her, knocking her backward. Images flashed behind her eyes, towering trees, a silver wolf beneath a blood moon, a woman with eyes like stars whispering her name. Lyra. Her eyes flew open. The voice was gone, the night still again. Only the glowing seedling remained, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. At dawn, someone banged on her door. Lyra startled awake at her table, where she'd fallen asleep watching the plant. It had grown taller overnight, nearly a foot now, its leaves wide and bright as mirrors. She hurried to open the door. It was Elder Myra, her pack's stern old matron, and beside her stood 2 royal guards in black armor etched with the silver wolf emblem. "Lyra Vale," one of them said formally. "By command of His Majesty King Cale Draven, you are to come with us to the capital at once." Lyra's stomach dropped. "What? Why?" The guard's expression didn't change. "The king has issued a summons. You are to travel under protection to Moonspire Palace." Elder Myra's eyes narrowed with fear, or maybe guilt. "What have you done, child?" she whispered. "Nothing," Lyra said quickly. "I swear I." The guard raised a hand. "You have 1 hour to prepare. Bring only what you can carry." When they left, Elder Myra lingered. Her voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "The king doesn't summon Omegas, Lyra. Not unless they're part of something far greater than themselves." "What does that mean?" Lyra demanded. But the elder only looked toward the forest, her expression distant. "It means," she said softly, "that the moon has remembered you." Lyra packed in a daze. Her healer's satchel. Her mother's pendant. A few herbs. Nothing more. Her gaze kept drifting to the silver plant on the windowsill. It had grown again, impossibly fast. Its stem was now thick and strong, curling toward the light. When she touched a leaf, it pulsed like a living thing. "I can't leave you behind," she murmured. She wrapped the small pot carefully and tucked it into her bag. Lisa, her only friend, burst through the door just as Lyra was tying the straps. "Lyra, I heard the guards, what's happening?" "I'm being taken to the capital." Lisa's eyes widened. "The king's palace?" "That's, Lyra, that's dangerous." "I don't have a choice," Lyra said quietly. "He summoned me himself." Lisa looked at the bag, then at the strange glow peeking from its folds. "What is that?" Lyra hesitated. "A gift. From him." Lisa's jaw dropped. "From the king? Are you mad? What did you do?" "Nothing," Lyra whispered. "At least, I think I did nothing." A knock at the door cut her off. The guards had returned. "It's time," one said. Lyra swallowed hard. Lisa grabbed her hands. "Promise you'll write." "I'll try." They hugged tightly. Then Lyra stepped outside, the morning light cold on her face. The villagers had gathered to watch, eyes full of curiosity, jealousy, and fear. Elder Myra stood among them. As Lyra passed, the old woman reached out and gripped her wrist. "Remember this, child," she said softly. "The moon gives nothing by accident." Before Lyra could ask what she meant, the guards ushered her toward the waiting carriage. Black and silver, emblazoned with the royal crest. She climbed in, clutching her bag to her chest. The door shut with a heavy thud, sealing her fate. As the carriage rolled forward, her village faded into mist. She glanced down at her satchel. The pot inside was warm, almost pulsing, like a heartbeat against her palm. And somewhere far ahead, in a palace of moonlight and shadow, the Alpha King smiled, sensing her coming. The road wound through endless forests, silver mist clinging to the ground like ghost breath. Lyra sat across from one of the royal guards, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Every rattle of the carriage wheel reminded her she was leaving everything she had ever known behind. Through the small window she caught glimpses of sunrise, streaks of pale gold piercing the grey. The world felt both new and ancient at once, as if the very air held its breath for what was coming. She looked down at her satchel. The small pot with the glowing plant rested inside, wrapped in cloth. It gave off a faint warmth, comforting yet strange. Sometimes, when the carriage jolted, she thought she could hear a hum from it, soft, almost like a lullaby. The older guard cleared his throat. "First time leaving your packlands?" Lyra nodded. "Yes. I never thought I'd have reason to." He studied her for a moment, curiosity softening his stern features. "Don't look so frightened, Omega. The capital's not all bad." "I'm not frightened," she lied. "Just uncertain." The younger guard chuckled quietly. "No one is summoned by the Alpha King without reason. You must have done something extraordinary." Lyra offered a weak smile. "I think I just helped the wrong stranger." The guards exchanged a glance but said nothing more. Outside, the forest began to thin, giving way to rolling hills dotted with silverleaf trees. Birds rose in flocks as the carriage passed. Hours later, when they stopped to rest the horses, Lyra stepped out to stretch her legs. She moved a little way off the road, breathing in the crisp air. The hum of the plant grew stronger in her satchel, as if reacting to the sunlight. She pulled it out carefully. To her astonishment, it had grown again, the stem now braided with thin veins of light that pulsed gently. She touched one leaf, and the world tilted. In an instant she wasn't on the roadside anymore. She stood in a vast hall of silver stone, the air thick with moonlight. Figures in flowing robes moved around her, chanting words she didn't know. At the center stood a woman with hair like starlight and eyes glowing pale blue. "Daughter of the moon," the woman said, voice echoing through Lyra's bones. "The time of shadows ends. Remember what sleeps within you." Lyra gasped, and the vision vanished. She was back on the road, kneeling in the dirt, the guards running toward her. "Are you all right?" one demanded. "Yes," she said faintly. "I just stood up too fast." But her heart raced. The woman's words repeated in her mind like a drumbeat. "Remember what sleeps within you." That night they camped under the open sky. Lyra couldn't sleep. She watched the stars shimmer overhead, feeling the pull of the moon stronger than ever. The seedling glowed softly beside her, casting silver light over her hands. She whispered, "What are you trying to tell me?" A faint breeze stirred the leaves, carrying a single word to her ears, though maybe it was only in her mind. Soon. By the third day, the spires of the capital appeared on the horizon, white stone glinting like frozen fire. Lyra pressed her face to the carriage window, eyes wide. The city was vast, alive with movement, markets, towers, bridges that arched like ribs of bone. Wolves in human form bustled everywhere, their scents a dizzying mixture of fur, smoke, and steel. The carriage climbed the winding road to Moonspire Palace, the seat of King Kaeldraven. Its towers rose high above the city, crowned with silver banners bearing the emblem of the wolf. Lyra's breath caught. It was both beautiful and terrifying. At the gates, rows of armored soldiers bowed as the carriage rolled through. The sound of their spears striking the stone in unison sent a shiver down her spine. When the door opened, a tall woman with steel-grey hair waited on the steps. Her eyes were sharp as blades. "Welcome to Moonspire," she said briskly. "I am Lady Alara, steward to His Majesty. You'll address me as my lady and do exactly as I tell you." "Understood." "Yes, my lady," Lyra murmured. "Good. Follow me." Inside, the palace glimmered with crystal light. Servants moved silently through marble corridors. The air smelled faintly of lavender and something wild, Kael's scent, she realized, though she had no idea how she knew. Lady Alara led her to a set of ornate doors. These are your chambers. You'll have food, clothing, and attendants. The king will see you tonight. Lyra blinked. Tonight. At moonrise, the steward confirmed. You are expected at the Hall of the Moon. Before Lyra could ask anything else, Lady Alara turned and left. Alone, Lyra let out a shaky breath and set her satchel on the table. She pulled out the pot. The plant's leaves now shimmered brighter than ever, their light dancing on the walls. She touched one gently. The warmth that spread through her hand was different this time, not shocking but tender, like recognition. For the first time since she left home, Lyra smiled. The moon hung full and heavy over Moonspire Palace, turning the marble halls to silver glass. Servants hurried about lighting candles as a bell tolled somewhere in the distance. Lyra stood before a mirror, staring at the reflection of a woman she barely recognized. She wore a soft gown the color of mist, simple but elegant. Her pale hair had been brushed until it shone. Someone had braided small silver threads through it. She looked like she belonged in this place, and yet she didn't. A knock sounded. The door opened and a familiar voice spoke. The king will see you now. Commander Ronan, the older guard who had escorted her, stood waiting. His face was unreadable, but his tone gentler than before. Don't be nervous. He's not as fearsome as people say. I'm not nervous, Lyra lied again. Of course not, he said dryly, offering his arm. Come. They walked through long corridors lit by torches and moonlight. Everywhere she looked were carvings of wolves, running, hunting, howling at unseen stars. The palace seemed alive with echoes. Finally they reached two massive doors of silverwood. Ronan pushed them open and stepped aside. His Majesty awaits. Lyra hesitated, then entered. The chamber beyond was vast but quiet. A fire burned low in a hearth carved with lunar symbols. At the far end stood King Cale Draven, gazing out through a tall window at the night sky. He wore a black tunic edged with silver, no crown, no guards. Just him, and the weight of his presence filled the room. When he turned, his amber eyes found her instantly. You came. You didn't give me much choice, she replied before she could stop herself. His mouth curved slightly. True. But you came all the same. Lyra folded her hands, fighting to stay calm. Why did you bring me here, Your Majesty? He studied her for a long moment before answering. Because you're not what you think you are. She frowned. You've said that before. I'm an Omega. A healer. That's all. Is it? He stepped closer, and the air between them seemed to tighten. When you touched me in your cottage, the bond flared. I felt it, power older than any alphas. Tell me, Lyra Vale, have you never wondered why your healing works when others fail? She hesitated. My mother taught me. Your mother, he interrupted softly. Was she also marked by the moon? Lyra blinked. Marked. He reached for her hand before she could withdraw it and turned her wrist upward. The faint silver mark she'd noticed days ago gleamed in the light. This, he said, tracing it with his thumb, is no curse. It's a seal of the Moonborn. I don't understand. You will. He released her hand and motioned toward the window. Come here. Outside, the full moon sat huge above the horizon, bathing the palace grounds in light. Look, he murmured. Do you feel it? Lyra closed her eyes. The glow of the moon soaked through her skin like warmth through cloth. Her heartbeat slowed. The hum of the seedling in her chamber pulsed in rhythm. She gasped as silver light rippled faintly across her fingertips. What's happening to me? Cale's voice was low, almost reverent. Your true nature is answering the call. She turned to him. You speak in riddles. What am I? He met her gaze steadily. The last descendant of the lunar bloodline, an Omega born with the moon's own power. Your pack's healers didn't know what to do with that, so they named it a curse. Lyra shook her head. That's impossible. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Then explain the seed that grew overnight. Explain how your touch drew power from the air itself. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The memory of the sprouting seed, the visions, the voice calling her daughter of the moon all rose inside her like a tide. Cale's tone softened. I didn't bring you here to frighten you, Lyra. I brought you here to protect you. There are those who would kill a moonborn before they let prophecy awaken. Prophecy, she whispered. He nodded. An ancient one. It speaks of a healer of silver blood who will bear the heirs of light and shadow, the twins who will end the age of war. Lyra's throat tightened. You think that's me? I know it is. Silence stretched between them, heavy with disbelief and something else neither could name. Finally she said, You could have left me in peace. He smiled faintly. There's no peace in ignorance. Her eyes burned. You speak as if my life belongs to your prophecy. Cale's voice dropped, almost a growl. No. It belongs to you. But you can't outrun what you are. For a long moment they simply looked at each other, the king and the rejected healer, bound by something older than both. Then Cale stepped back, his control returning. Rest now, he said quietly. You'll have many questions when dawn comes. Tomorrow, the council will meet you. And you will begin to learn what it means to be moonborn. She hesitated. And if I refuse? He turned toward the window again. You won't. Lyra returned to her chambers in silence. The palace corridors were hushed, the only sound her heartbeat echoing in her ears. When she entered her room, the first thing she saw was the seedling. It had transformed while she was gone, its stem now silver white, its leaves wide and glowing like tiny mirrors. The light bathed the walls in shifting patterns. Lyra approached slowly. What are you becoming? The leaves trembled, and a faint whisper filled the air like the echo of her own voice. Remember what sleeps within you. Her hands trembled as she reached out and touched it. A warmth spread up her arm, gentle this time, and for the first time she didn't pull away. I'll remember, she whispered. Even if I'm afraid. Outside, the moon drifted higher, silver light pouring through the window. Somewhere deep within the palace, the Alpha King watched the same moon, feeling a pull in his chest he hadn't felt in years. And though neither of them spoke the word aloud, both knew something had begun that could never be undone. Morning sunlight spilled across the palace courtyard, bright enough to make the marble glitter. Lyra stood on the balcony of her chamber, staring at the gardens below. It all looked too perfect, like a painting that could shatter if touched. She had not slept. The king's words still rang in her mind, the last descendant of the lunar bloodline. Every breath she took carried that strange hum of power just under her skin. The seedling on her table swayed though there was no breeze. A soft knock came at the door. When she opened it, a young attendant bowed quickly. Good morning, my lady. The steward asked me to bring you to breakfast in the Eastern Hall. My lady. Lyra echoed, startled. No one in her pack had ever called her that. It is the king's command, the girl said with a nervous smile. He said you are to be treated as a guest of honor. Guest or prisoner? Lyra wasn't sure. Still, she followed. The corridors were endless arched ceilings painted with wolves howling under silver moons. Each step she took echoed softly. Other servants paused to stare as she passed, whispering behind their hands. At last they reached a long room filled with sunlight and the smell of bread and honey. King Cale was already there, seated at a table carved from dark oak. He looked up as she entered, his amber eyes bright as firelight. Sit, he said simply. Lyra obeyed, feeling awkward in the elegant chair. No guards stood near him, only quiet confidence radiating from the man himself. She glanced around at the empty hall. You dine alone, Your Majesty? Often. He poured tea into her cup before his own. Few enjoy the company of a king who spends his nights chasing prophecy. That sounds lonely, she said before thinking. He gave a soft laugh. Lonely perhaps, but useful. Loneliness makes a man listen when the world whispers. Lyra sipped her tea to hide her blush. He had that effect on her, half charm, half storm. After a moment he asked, Did the seedling grow again? She nodded. It's almost a small tree now. It glows brighter every night. That glow is your energy answering it, Cale said. You feed it without meaning to. I don't understand how. You will. Today you'll meet someone who can help. He rose, and the guards at the far end opened the doors. Come. There is someone you should meet before the council gathers. They walked through inner courtyards where fountains glittered like liquid crystal. The scent of roses mixed with the sharper tang of silver-leaf trees. Everywhere Lyra looked, wolves were carved into the stone as if the palace itself watched her. Kale stopped at a smaller building shaped like a crescent moon. Inside waited a woman robed in pale grey, her eyes clouded with age yet bright with power. "This is Priestess Marwen," Kale said. "She serves the Moon Temple and keeps the old records." The priestess bowed slightly. "Your Majesty. And you, child, you shine brighter than I expected." Lyra flushed. "I didn't mean to shine." Marwen chuckled. "No one ever does. It is the moon's gift, not your choice." She gestured to a round basin filled with still water. "Come closer, healer Lyra." Lyra obeyed. The surface of the water reflected her face, then shimmered until the image shifted. She saw her mother kneeling under the full moon, whispering words in a language Lyra had never known. A baby lay in her arms, Lyra herself, tiny and sleeping. The vision blurred into white light. When it cleared, she saw a symbol glowing in the water, a wolf encircled by silver leaves. "The mark of the lunar bloodline," Marwen said quietly. "It appears only for those chosen by the goddess. Your power is awakening fast, child. That is why the king brought you here, before others could claim or destroy you." "Others?" Lyra asked. Marwen's expression darkened. "There are alphas who fear what they cannot control. They would rather see the prophecy buried than fulfilled." Kale spoke softly beside her. "That's why you'll stay within the palace walls until I say otherwise." Lyra turned to him. "Stay locked away, you mean?" "Safe," he corrected. "Call it what you will." Their eyes met, neither looked away. Something in that gaze felt older than words. Marwen cleared her throat gently. "If I may, Your Majesty, the moon will be strong again tonight. It might reveal more if the girl meditates by her seedling." Kale nodded. "So be it. Rest now, Lyra. Tomorrow, the council will test your truth." "Test me," she repeated. "They'll want proof," he said. "Be ready." That evening, Lyra sat by her glowing plant, doing as Marwen instructed, breathing with the rhythm of the leaves. Outside her window the city murmured, distant as a dream. As moonlight poured across her hands, the air in the room thickened. The silver glow around the plant brightened until she could barely see. Then a voice spoke inside her head, clear and soft. "You are the bridge, child of light and shadow. One heartbeat will become two, and peace will walk in their steps." The light dimmed. Lyra opened her eyes, trembling. 2 heartbeats. What could that mean? She looked out at the moon and whispered, "Whatever you're planning, please don't destroy me for it." The next morning, the palace buzzed like a disturbed hive. Word had spread that the king had brought an unknown Omega into his court. Servants whispered in corners, nobles muttered in hallways. Lyra felt their stares wherever she went. Lady Alara met her outside the council chamber. "Keep your head high," the steward murmured. "They smell fear like wolves." Lyra almost laughed. "They are wolves." "Exactly," Alara said, pushing open the heavy doors. The council room was circular, sunlight pouring through a dome of glass. 12 nobles sat at a curved table, their insignias gleaming on their chests. Kale sat on a raised seat at the center. When Lyra entered, all conversation stopped. "This is the healer I told you of," Kale announced. "Lyra Vale of the Hollow Pack." One noble, a tall woman in red armor, snorted. "The Barren healer? Your Majesty, with respect, surely you jest." Kale's tone was icy. "I rarely jest." Another counselor, older and more cautious, leaned forward. "She bears the mark." Kale gestured toward Lyra. "Show them." Hands shaking slightly, Lyra pulled back her sleeve. The silver mark on her wrist shimmered under the sunlight, casting small reflections on the table. A murmur swept through the council. The woman in red sneered. "Tricks of paint and powder." Kale's voice sharpened. "Do you accuse me of deception, Lady Barren?" She lowered her eyes but her tone stayed cool. "I accuse only what I see. If she truly is moonborn, let the moon itself prove it." Kale's eyes flicked to Lyra, a silent question. "Can you bear this?" She drew a breath. If that's what it takes. That night, the council gathered again in the open courtyard beneath the rising moon. Servants lined the walls. Lyra stood in the center, her heart hammering. Cale watched from the dais, arms crossed. "Touch the fountain," Lady Werewolf commanded. "If the moon claims you, we will see its light respond." Lyra stepped forward. The water of the marble fountain glimmered faintly. She knelt, hesitated, then placed her hands on the surface. Cold bit through her palms, and then warmth surged upward, bright and alive. Silver light burst from the fountain, racing along the carved channels of the courtyard floor. The nobles gasped as beams of moonlight arched into the sky like living ribbons. Lyra's hair lifted in a soft breeze that came from nowhere. She heard whispers again, 1,000 soft voices blending into one. "Child of the moon, the balance awakens." When the glow faded, the courtyard was silent except for the fountain's gentle trickle. Lyra fell to her knees, breathless. Lady Werewolf could only stare. She shouldn't exist. Cale stepped down from the dais and helped Lyra to her feet. "She does. And she's under my protection." The other nobles bowed, though some looked more frightened than respectful. Cale's voice carried across the courtyard. "Spread the word. The prophecy lives." Later, alone in her chamber, Lyra tried to calm her racing thoughts. She felt stronger and yet more uncertain than ever. Power thrummed through her veins like a second pulse. A soft knock came. When she opened the door, Cale stood there, candlelight flickering across his face. "I frightened them," she said quietly. "You enlightened them," he replied. "Fear is just the first step to belief." Lyra smiled faintly. "You make prophecy sound like politics." He chuckled. "They're not so different." For a moment neither spoke. Then he said, "Rest now. Tomorrow you'll begin training with the priestess. You must learn control before your power decides for you." "Control," she repeated. "Is that what you have?" His smile faded. "Only most days." He turned to leave, then paused. "Lyra, whatever happens next, remember that you are not here because of me. You are here because the moon chose you long before I ever knew your name." When he was gone, Lyra closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. The moonlight streamed through the window, wrapping her in silver glow. Somewhere deep inside, the power stirred again, quiet, waiting. And Lyra Vale, once a rejected healer of no worth, finally began to believe that her story was only just beginning. The palace hummed with noise and golden light. Servants carried trays through long halls, musicians tuned stringed lutes, and the air smelled of roasted herbs and honey wine. It was the night of the full moon feast, when nobles from every territory gathered to honor the goddess. This time, all their whispers circled around a single name, Lyra Vale. She stood behind a curtain at the edge of the grand hall, smoothing the folds of a pale silver gown Lady Alara had chosen. It glittered faintly when she moved. Her hands were cold even though the fire blazed high. Through the curtain she heard voices. "That's her, the king's Barren healer." Impossible. No Omega could shine with moonlight. The king's bewitched, surely. Every word felt like a needle. She took a deep breath. "You faced worse," she reminded herself. "You survived being nothing." A guard drew the curtain aside. "His Majesty requests your presence." The crowd quieted as she stepped into the hall. Hundreds of eyes turned to her. The ceiling soared above like a night sky carved in stone. At the center of it all sat King Cale Draven, his black and silver armor catching the torchlight. He rose when she approached, a rare smile softening the sharpness of his face. "Lyra Vale," he said, voice carrying easily. "Our guest of honor." Her knees felt weak, but she managed a bow. "Your Majesty." The nobles murmured. Cale offered his arm. "Walk with me." He led her down the center of the hall to the long table at the front. The music resumed, soft drums, a low chant echoing the pulse of the moon. When they sat, conversation resumed in nervous bursts. Cale poured wine into 2 silver cups. "You're handling this better than most alphas would." "I'm shaking inside," she admitted. "Then you're honest as well as brave." He raised his cup. "To honesty. The rarest courage." She sipped carefully. The wine tasted of berries and smoke. Why bring me here, before all these people? Because they need to see you, he said. Fear fades faster when faced. Lyra glanced at the rows of nobles watching them. Some glared openly, others looked curious, even awed. They don't look less afraid. They will. He leaned closer. When the moon reaches its peak, you'll understand. Before she could ask, Lady Werren swept up to the table, her crimson gown blazing like fire. Your Majesty, she said with a cold smile, the council congratulates you on your discovery. But surely you do not intend to announce her as a royal equal? Cale's tone cooled. I intend to let truth announce itself. Werren's eyes slid to Lyra. Then let her prove it. Gasps rustled through the hall. Cale's hand tightened on his cup, but he nodded once. So be it. At moonrise. Werren inclined her head and withdrew, satisfied. Lyra's heart pounded. Prove what, exactly? That you are what the prophecy foretold, Cale said quietly. They'll expect a sign from the goddess. I don't even know what that means. Neither did I, he replied. The first time the moon tested me. Their eyes met, two storms recognizing each other. When the feast ended, Cale led her out onto the terrace above the gardens. The night was still, the air scented with jasmine. Below, fountains glowed under the moon. She hates me, Lyra murmured. Lady Werren hates everything she can't command, he said. That includes the moon. Lyra smiled faintly. And you? He looked at her for a long time. I don't command the moon. I listen to it. Silence stretched between them, gentle and heavy at once. The music from inside drifted out in fragments, laughter, clinking cups, the sound of a world that wasn't hers. Cale turned toward the sky. When the moon stands directly above us, come to the courtyard of wolves. Whatever happens, don't run from it. She nodded, though fear twisted inside her. The bells struck midnight. The moon hung full and white, flooding the palace with cold light. Lyra crossed the marble bridge to the courtyard. Hundreds had gathered again, lords, soldiers, servants, faces lifted to the sky. The fountain in the center glimmered faintly, its water calm as glass. Cale waited beside it, cloak stirring in the wind. When she reached him, he asked softly, Ready? No, she said truthfully. Good. Neither am I. He turned to the crowd. Tonight, the goddess decides. Let her light bear witness. He stepped back. All eyes turned to Lyra. The world fell silent. She swallowed hard and stepped into the moonlight. It felt cool at first, then warm like invisible hands pressing against her skin. The silver mark on her wrist began to glow. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Lady Werren's voice cut sharp through the stillness. Tricks of reflection, but then the ground beneath Lyra's feet shimmered. Thin lines of light spread outward like roots, connecting to the fountain. The water rose, not splashing, but lifting in smooth ribbons that swirled around her. Lyra's breath caught. The energy coursing through her was neither pain nor pleasure, it was recognition. She felt the heartbeat of the earth, the whisper of the moon. Images flashed behind her eyes, wolves running through silver forests, women crowned with starlight, her mother holding a newborn beneath a glowing tree. The voices came again, layered and distant. The last shall carry the dawn. 2 heartbeats, 1 light. Her knees buckled, but Cale was there instantly, steadying her. Breathe, he murmured. Let it pass through you. The glow intensified. Her hair lifted slightly, rippling as though underwater. The crowd fell to their knees. Even Lady Werren lowered her gaze. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the light dimmed. The water collapsed back into the fountain with a soft rush. Lyra sagged against Cale, exhausted. He caught her easily, one arm around her shoulders. Enough, he told the council. The moon has spoken. Werren rose shakily. What is she? Cale looked down at Lyra. The moonborn, he said simply. The living bond between pack and goddess. A cheer started among the guards, hesitant at first, then louder. The sound rolled across the courtyard like thunder. Lyra blinked, dazed. I didn't mean to do that. You didn't, Cale said quietly. The moon did. Later, Back in her chamber, Lyra sat wrapped in a blanket near the window. The palace had gone mostly quiet, though echoes of celebration drifted faintly. The seedling on her table now shimmered brighter than ever, its leaves shaped like tiny wolf paws. She touched one gently. "You saw it too, didn't you?" The plant gave a faint tremor, as if in answer. A knock sounded. Kale entered without armor this time, only a plain tunic. He looked less like a king and more like a man who hadn't rested in years. "You should be sleeping," he said. "I can't." She hesitated. "Everything feels different. Like my veins are full of moonlight." "That's not far from the truth." He leaned against the window frame. "The moon marked you publicly. There's no going back now." Lyra studied him. "Does that trouble you?" "It changes everything," he admitted. "Some will see you as salvation, others as threat. Power breeds both." "Then why risk it?" "Because prophecy doesn't care for comfort." He smiled faintly. "And because when I saw that light around you, for the first time I believed peace might be possible." Lyra turned to the window. The moon was lower now, softer, as if tired after its display. "The priestess said my power is growing too quickly." "She's right. You'll need to learn to guide it." "Will you teach me?" Kale shook his head. "My gift lies in command, not in healing. But I can protect you while you learn." "Protect me from whom?" His expression darkened. "The ones who hunted your bloodline before. There are still those who fear what the Moonborn can do." Lyra shivered. "Then I'm a danger to them." "And to yourself," he said quietly. "Until you master it." For a moment they simply watched the fading moonlight together. The silence between them was not empty, it was full of things unsaid. Finally she whispered, "When I was a child, I used to pray the goddess would notice me. Now I think she did, and I'm not sure I like it." Kale's voice softened. "The goddess doesn't choose lightly. She saw something in you that even you haven't yet. What if she's wrong?" He smiled. "Then we'll both be in trouble." That pulled a laugh from her, quiet but real. For the first time since leaving her pack, Lyra didn't feel entirely alone. Outside, the palace torches burned low. Somewhere deep in the gardens, wolves began to howl a long, rising chorus that filled the night. Kale listened, then said, "They're singing for you. They feel the change." Lyra looked down at her glowing hands. "So it's true then. I'm part of a prophecy." "You are," he said. "But prophecies are only beginnings. What comes after, that's choice." He straightened. "Rest, Lyra Vale. Tomorrow the priestess will begin your lessons. The moon will test you again soon." When he left, she stayed by the window until dawn painted the sky pink. The seedling's light dimmed with the morning, but one new bud had opened silver-white, shaped like a tiny flower. Lyra smiled faintly. "Then we'll both learn how to grow," she whispered. And as the first sunlight touched her face, she felt the faint echo of two heartbeats in the air, one her own, and one she couldn't yet name. Morning came with a sky as white as bone. Bells rang across the palace, calling the court to assemble. Lyra stood on the balcony outside her chamber, her stomach twisting with dread. Lady Alara had told her at dawn, the council demanded a public trial to prove her control. The same nobles who had doubted her would now watch for her failure. She dressed simply, a grey tunic and dark trousers, the kind she once wore in her village. No silk could hide fear. She looked at her reflection and whispered, "You've healed broken bones, old wounds, even pride. You can do this too." A knock came. Commander Ronan entered, armor gleaming. "They're ready for you." "I don't even know what they'll ask me to do," she said. He hesitated. "Neither does anyone else. That's what worries them." Lyra took a deep breath. "Then let's end their worry." The moon arena lay beneath the palace, a wide circle of pale stone open to the sky. Hundreds of onlookers filled the tiers above. The council sat on a high platform, robes fluttering in the wind. Kale waited at the center, expression unreadable. When Lyra stepped into the arena, a murmur swept through the crowd. She ignored it and walked toward him. "You said this is a test," she said. "A test of what?" "Of faith," he replied. "Yours, theirs, and mine." He gestured toward a massive iron gate. They're bringing the wounded. 2 soldiers pushed a cart through the gate. On it lay a young wolf, barely breathing. Silver chains bound its paws, poisonous metal to their kind. The sight hit Lyra like a blow. What happened to it? She asked. An ambush in the border woods, Cale said quietly. The healers failed. They want to see if you can succeed. Lyra knelt beside the creature. Its fur was matted with blood, its eyes cloudy with pain. She felt the stares of the crowd on her back, waiting, judging. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Every wound has a rhythm. Listen first, act second. Lyra closed her eyes. The noise faded until she heard it, a faint flutter beneath the wolf's ribs. The pulse of life, small but stubborn. She pressed her hands to its side. The first touch burned. Poison. She gritted her teeth and let her power flow. Silver light bled from her palms, crawling over the animal's wounds like living thread. Gasps erupted from the stands. The light sank into the flesh, knitting torn skin, melting the chains into harmless dust. When she opened her eyes, the wolf was breathing evenly, its coat clean and whole. It blinked at her, then licked her hand once before padding away. The arena erupted in shouts, half awe, half fear. Lady Barren rose to her feet. This isn't healing, it's witchcraft. Cale's voice thundered across the stones. This is truth. He turned to the crowd. You doubted the moon's choice. Now you've seen it. Lyra stood slowly, swaying with exhaustion. Cale was beside her in a heartbeat, steadying her with a hand on her arm. Easy, he murmured. Power costs energy. Let the crowd see you strong, not spent. She straightened, meeting the sea of eyes above. The wolf lives, she said simply. Judge that however you wish. Then she walked out of the arena, leaving silence in her wake. That night, the city rang with new rumors, some calling her saint, others sorceress. Lyra wanted only sleep, but her body thrummed with leftover energy. She went to the garden balcony, where the air smelled of rain and herbs. Below, torches glowed along the palace walls. Footsteps approached. You shouldn't be alone after a display like that, Cale said. He joined her at the railing. Are they afraid of me now? She asked. They're afraid of what they can't control, he replied. Which is nearly everything. She glanced at him. You don't seem afraid. I am, he admitted. But not of you. What then? He looked out over the dark gardens. Of what comes next. The wind lifted her hair, and for a moment she felt the pull between them like a tide, 2 forces drawn together by something neither asked for. She stepped back, breaking the tension. I should rest, she said softly. Of course, he replied, but his gaze lingered as she turned away. Rain drummed against the windows all morning. Lyra woke to find the seedling on her table blooming, delicate silver petals shaped like tiny moons. She touched one and felt calm spread through her chest, soothing yesterday's exhaustion. When she went to the temple for training, Priestess Marwen greeted her with a knowing smile. You touched the core of your gift yesterday. How does it feel? Like standing too close to lightning, Lyra said. Marwen chuckled. Good. Power is meant to remind us we're alive. They spent the morning in lessons, how to channel energy without burning herself out, how to draw strength from light rather than blood. Each exercise left her dizzy but steadier. At midday, a guard arrived. The king requests your presence in the North Library. Marwen nodded. Go. He seldom requests, he usually commands. It must matter. The North Library was quiet, lit only by tall windows and flickering candles. Cale stood near a table piled with maps. Rain streaked the glass behind him. When he turned, she saw fatigue around his eyes, softened by something almost human. You look tired, she said. He smiled faintly. Kings don't sleep easily. What did you want to see me for? He gestured to the maps. Do you know these lands? Lyra studied them. The 7 territories, she said. My pack lived near the Hollow River. He nodded. War has touched each one in the last decade. Old rivalries, greed, pride. The prophecy promises unity, but only through the Moonborn. That means you. Lyra felt her stomach twist. You think I'm supposed to end wars? I think you're meant to heal more than bodies, he said quietly. And I can't do that alone. He walked closer. When I became king, I thought strength meant ruling without weakness. Then I met you, an Omega who stood straight while her world spat on her. You reminded me that strength and mercy aren't enemies. Lyra didn't know what to say. You speak as though you've known me forever. Sometimes it feels that way, he admitted. When the goddess marked you, something in me recognized it. My wolf has been restless since. A flush rose to her cheeks. What does that mean? He looked away, almost embarrassed. It means we may be bound more deeply than fate allows. The prophecy speaks of a bond between king and healer, two halves of the same light. Lyra's heart pounded. You're saying we're mates? He didn't deny it. I'm saying the bond is awakening, whether we want it or not. She stepped back. That's impossible. I barely know you. The soul knows before the mind, he said. But it changes nothing of your freedom. You can walk away if you wish. I'll still protect you. His honesty disarmed her more than any declaration could have. She studied him, the man who carried a kingdom's weight, and still looked at her as though she were something rare. What if the prophecy's wrong? She whispered. Then we write our own. A servant entered suddenly, breaking the moment. Your Majesty, urgent news. A caravan from the border was attacked, 3 dead, 1 survivor requesting the healer. Kale turned to Lyra. Will you come? She nodded. Of course. They hurried through the rain to the palace courtyard, where soldiers unloaded a wounded messenger. His arm was crushed, blood soaking his tunic. Lyra knelt beside him, ignoring the cold mud. Hold still, she murmured. You'll be all right. Kale knelt opposite her. Can you save him? Yes, but it will drain me. Then take mine, he said. If the moon binds us, share the burden. Lyra met his eyes. Something ancient flickered between them, trust older than memory. She placed one hand on the messenger's chest and the other over Kale's. Energy surged, weaving through all 3 like silver threads. The wound closed, the messenger's breathing steadied. When it was done, Lyra sagged forward. Kale caught her easily. You said not to burn yourself out, he murmured. I borrowed your strength, she whispered. You'll feel it later. He laughed softly. Then I'll consider it a fair trade. That night, thunder rolled beyond the palace walls. Lyra sat by the fire in her chamber, still trembling from the healing. A knock came, and before she could answer, Kale entered. He carried no crown, only a cloak heavy with rain. I shouldn't disturb you, he said, but I thought you should know the messenger survived. He called you the moon's blessing. Lyra smiled faintly. I'm glad. Kale moved closer to the hearth. There's something else. The priestess believes your powers are reaching a threshold. Each time you heal, the bond between us strengthens. It's only a matter of time before the council notices. Will that cause trouble? It already does. His eyes softened. But I'd rather face trouble with you than peace without you. For a heartbeat the world held still, the rain, the fire, their breathing. Then Lyra stepped back, flustered. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because I might start believing them. Kale smiled sadly. Then believe them only a little. He turned toward the door, then paused. Rest, Lyra. Tomorrow we meet the ambassadors from the border packs. They must see the woman behind the light. When he left, she touched her wrist. The silver mark pulsed faintly, answering something she couldn't name. She looked toward the window where rain still fell and whispered, Moon, what are you doing to me? The seedling on her table rustled, a single petal drifting down like a reply. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the city below, a kingdom poised between war and hope. And within its heart, a healer and a king, bound by prophecy, stood on the edge of something neither could yet define. By dawn the rain had stopped, leaving the palace washed and glittering. From her balcony Lyra could see banners fluttering on the walls below, each one marked with a different pack's emblem. The border ambassadors had arrived. Lady Alara appeared at her door before breakfast, brisk as always. My lady, the king requests that you stand beside him during the audience. You'll speak only when addressed. Because I'm a curiosity, Lyra said wryly. Because you are a symbol, Alara corrected. Symbols must be handled carefully. Lyra smiled faintly. You make it sound as though I'm made of glass. The steward's eyes softened. You are made of light. That's far more dangerous. The great hall had been transformed. Long tables of polished oak gleamed under lanterns shaped like moons. Guards lined the walls, their armor silvered. The air smelled of wet stone, tension, and too much perfume. Kale stood at the head of the hall, dressed not for battle but in black formal robes that caught every flicker of light. When Lyra entered, the crowd's murmurs died. She walked to him, chin high. He gave the smallest nod approval, reassurance, both. One by one, the ambassadors bowed before the throne. Lord Ratha of the Ironfang pack, broad-shouldered and scar-faced, spoke first. Your Majesty, we come to renew our oath of peace, provided this moonborn doesn't upset the balance. Kale's tone stayed level. Peace depends on trust, not fear. The moonborn is proof the goddess has not forsaken us. Ratha's gaze slid to Lyra. Or proof she plays games. Lyra felt heat rise in her chest but said nothing. Kale's glance warned her to hold steady. Next came Lady Eileen of the Frost Peaks, her white fur cloak trailing behind. My king, the prophecy speaks of 2 heartbeats, 1 light. Yet there is only one moonborn. Does that not mean the second is still hidden? Kale replied carefully. Prophecies are puzzles, not maps. Lyra's stomach tightened. 2 heartbeats. The words had haunted her since that night by the fountain. What if the second part of the prophecy was already moving somewhere beyond their sight? The council continued for hours, requests for trade, complaints about borders, veiled threats disguised as courtesy. Through it all Kale remained calm, answering with logic and authority. Lyra watched him, realizing how much of leadership was silence, how much of control was patience. At last Lord Ratha slammed his cup onto the table. Forgive me, but I'll not bend knee to superstition. My pack bows only to strength. Kale's amber eyes hardened. Then look well, Ratha, and see which shines brighter, your blade or the moon above your head. Ratha half rose, but before more could be said, a sudden gust blew through the hall, snuffing several torches. Shadows rippled across the walls. A servant screamed as every window shattered outward, showering the floor with glass. Protect the king, someone shouted. Kale was already moving. He caught Lyra by the arm and pulled her behind the dais. The air burned cold, something unseen prowled the darkness. Lyra felt it, a pulse of hatred, sharp and ancient. She pressed her palms to the floor instinctively. Silver light rippled from her hands, forming a dome around them. The cold receded with a hiss. When the light cleared, the intruder was gone, only frost clinging to the stones. Kale's voice rang out. Search every corridor. Now. Guards scattered. Lyra's light faded, she trembled with exhaustion. Kale turned to her. That wasn't random. Someone summoned it. An assassin? Worse, he said grimly. A shadowcaster. There hasn't been one in a century. Lyra swallowed. Then whoever sent it knew what I am. He nodded slowly. And what you might become. That night, the palace sealed itself in silence. Extra guards patrolled the halls, priests burned silver incense to drive out darkness. Lyra couldn't sleep. She sat near the hearth, staring at the faint frost still crusting her boots. A knock came. Kale entered quietly. You're safe. For now, she said. But someone wanted to test me. Or frighten you. It didn't work. She tried to sound certain. The tremor in her voice betrayed her. Kale crouched beside her chair. Lyra, listen to me. Fear isn't failure. It's the body's way of saying life still matters. Promise you'll keep living, no matter what they send. I promise, she whispered. He hesitated, then took her hand briefly, his thumb brushing the silver mark at her wrist. Good. Then he straightened. Rest if you can. Tomorrow we find out who opened the gate to that thing. When he left, she watched the fire until dawn, the shadows dancing like warnings she couldn't yet read. By morning, the frost was gone, but the fear it left behind clung to everyone. Kale summoned his council to the war room. Lyra joined at his request, though several nobles frowned at her presence. Captain Ronan spread a blood-stained scrap of cloth across the table. "We found this near the outer gate." A sigil burned into it, black sun inside a crescent. Lady Veren's face went pale. "That mark belongs to the Nightclaw Order. They were destroyed generations ago." "Apparently not," Kale said. "They were shadowcasters loyal to the old kings who defied the goddess. If they've returned, they'll come for the Moonborn again." Lyra frowned. "Why me?" "Because you represent change," Kale said. "And old powers despise change." He turned to the others. "We double the guards. No one enters the palace without clearance." Dismissed. When the room emptied, Kale exhaled. "They'll panic before they prepare." "Then we prepare first," Lyra said. He looked at her, a flicker of admiration breaking through fatigue. "Agreed." Later that day she found Priestess Marwen in the temple courtyard, scattering crushed herbs into a fountain. "The king said they might come again," Lyra told her. "How do you fight what you can't see?" Marwen's cloudy eyes sharpened. "You don't fight shadows with light alone. You anchor it. The stronger your heart, the less they can feed." "My heart feels anything but strong." "Then find what strengthens it," the priestess said gently. "Faith, love, anger, anything real." Lyra thought of Kale, of his calm in battle, his rare smile, the weight he carried. Maybe that was her anchor, though she didn't dare admit it aloud. That evening Kale called her to the highest tower. The view stretched for miles, forests, rivers, and mountains painted gold by sunset. He stood by the railing, cloak whipping in the wind. "Beautiful," she said. "Dangerous," he corrected. "Every path leading here could carry enemies." Lyra stepped beside him. "You've been king since you were barely grown. Do you ever get tired of watching for threats?" "Every hour," he said. "But I've learned something: if you stare at danger too long, you stop seeing the beauty beside it." She followed his gaze. For a moment neither spoke. Then Kale said quietly, "The Shadowcasters came from the east once. That's where we'll send scouts." She asked. "You think I'd leave you behind after last night?" She smiled. "I thought kings gave orders, not invitations." "I thought healers stayed safe in cottages," he countered. "It seems we're both bad at staying where we belong." They shared a brief, quiet laugh, rare and fragile. That night Lyra dreamed of silver forests and voices calling her name. When she woke, moonlight pooled across her bed like spilled water. The seedling on her table had grown again, now nearly waist-high, its branches tipped with small buds that glowed faintly blue. She reached out and felt a pulse through it, slow and steady, like a heartbeat. "2 heartbeats," the prophecy whispered. Before she could think further, the door burst open. A breathless guard stumbled inside. "My lady, the king's scouts returned early. They found the enemy's camp." Lyra followed him to the council chamber, where Kale and the captains stood over a new map. He looked up as she entered. "The Nightclaw Order has been rebuilding under our noses. Their leader calls himself the Veil." "A title?" she asked. "A warning," Kale said. "He hides between worlds, half spirit, half man. He uses moonlight twisted through darkness. The old texts called him the fallen son of the goddess." Lyra felt the room tilt. "Then he'll come for me." Kale's jaw tightened. "Let him try." The following days blurred into preparation. Messengers rode out to warn the border packs. The palace forges worked day and night crafting weapons tipped with silver. Priestess Marwen placed moon-blessed runes at every door. Lyra trained relentlessly. She learned to draw her power through calm breathing, to call light into her palms without losing balance. Kale often watched from the edge of the courtyard, silent but steady, a reminder that she wasn't alone. One evening, after she collapsed from exhaustion, he lifted her easily. "Enough for today," he said. "You're bossy for someone who said I was free," she muttered. "Freedom doesn't mean breaking yourself," he replied. "Rest." She wanted to protest, but the warmth of his arms and the rhythm of his heartbeat quieted her. For the first time, safety didn't feel like a cage. As the next full moon approached, omens grew darker. Wolves in the city howled at nothing. The silver leaves of her seedling began to darken at the edges. Lyra spent each night by the window, watching for signs. On the eve of the full moon, Cale came to her chamber. He carried a single object wrapped in cloth. "The priestess finished this for you," he said, unfolding the fabric. It was a small pendant, 2 crescents joined tip to tip, forming an unbroken circle. "What is it?" she asked. "An anchor," he said. "When darkness presses, hold it. It's forged from the same metal as my crown, silver tempered with moonfire." She turned it in her fingers. It shimmered softly. "Thank you." Cale hesitated at the door. "If the veil attacks, I'll draw him out. You focus on the light. Promise me." Lyra met his eyes. "I promise to survive. That's all I ask." When he left, she placed the pendant around her neck. The metal warmed instantly, as if alive. Outside, clouds began to crawl across the moon, dimming its glow. The air smelled of coming storm. Lyra whispered to the shadows, "If you're listening, Veil, come. I'm not the frightened girl you think I am." Somewhere deep in the forest beyond the walls, something answered with a low, distant howl, neither beast nor man, but both. The war of light and shadow had begun. The full moon rose blood-red behind the clouds. The air was too still, too heavy. Even the wolves kept silent. Lyra stood at her window, the silver pendant warm against her chest. The seedling beside her trembled though no wind stirred. Its glow pulsed like a heartbeat, fast, warning. She could feel the hum of danger under her skin. Then came the sound, deep horns echoing through the mountains. The alarm. The enemy had come. She grabbed her cloak and ran. Outside, the palace blazed with movement. Soldiers shouted orders, armor clashed, firelight flickered along the walls. Cale was already in the courtyard, sword drawn, shouting commands. When he saw her, his expression hardened. "I told you to stay inside." "I won't hide while they die," she said. He started to argue, then stopped. "Fine. Stay near me." A roar cut through the air, something neither human nor wolf. A creature of shadow burst over the wall, its body smoke and claws. The nearest soldiers struck, but their blades passed through it. Lyra raised her hands instinctively. Silver light flared. The creature shrieked as her glow burned through its form, dissolving it to ash. The soldiers stared. Cale barked, "You heard her. Moonlight kills them, keep to the light." More shapes crawled from the dark, dozens of them. Lyra fought beside the king, light against shadow, until her arms trembled. Every burst of energy drained her, but she refused to stop. Then, through the chaos, a figure appeared at the far end of the courtyard, a tall man cloaked in black mist. His face was pale, eyes silver with no pupil. The air bent around him. Cale froze. The veil. Lyra felt the same chill she'd sensed that night in the hall. The shadowcaster smiled faintly. "So," he said, voice smooth as smoke. "The Moonborn lives after all. I wondered how long the goddess's pet would hide." Cale stepped forward, sword gleaming. "You'll find her harder to cage than you think." The veil's gaze flicked to Lyra. A healer pretending to be a savior. "You glow prettily, girl. Tell me, do you know what your power costs?" "I don't care," she said, lifting her hands. "You should." His smile deepened. "Every time you heal, the moon takes a piece of you. That's why your bloodline died. Burned out by the light they worshipped." Her heart stuttered. Lies, she wanted to say, but something in his tone felt like truth twisted sideways. Cale lunged, blade flashing. The veil blocked with one hand, shadow solidifying into metal. Sparks burst. The courtyard thundered with the clash. Lyra sent a wave of light toward the veil, but it shattered against him like water on stone. He laughed. "You shine bright, but you haven't learned control." He lifted his hand. A lash of darkness cracked through the air, striking Lyra square in the chest. Pain exploded. She fell to her knees, breath knocked out. The pendant at her neck flared blindingly, absorbing part of the blow. Cale roared and drove his sword deep into the veil's shoulder. The shadow screamed, dissolving into mist that fled over the walls. The remaining creatures scattered with him, melting into the night. Silence fell. The soldiers cheered weakly. Lyra tried to stand but collapsed. Kale was beside her instantly. "You're hurt," he said. "It's not bad," she whispered, though her vision blurred. The pendant's light faded, leaving a charred mark across the silver. Kale lifted her easily. "You saved us all, Lyra. But next time, don't trade your life for victory." She tried to answer, but darkness pulled her under. She woke to warmth and the scent of herbs. The world swam into focus, the temple's white ceiling, candles flickering nearby, the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. Priestess Marwen sat at her side, face lined with concern. "You were gone for hours," the priestess murmured. "We thought the moon might take you." Lyra's throat was dry. "Kale? Alive," Marwen said. "Wounded, but nothing he couldn't hide behind pride." Relief washed over her. The veil escaped. "Yes." Marwen's eyes darkened. "But not unscathed. He'll need time to recover. So will you." Lyra looked down. Her skin was pale, veins faintly glowing beneath it. "He said every healing takes something from me." Marwen hesitated. "It's partly true. Moonborn power is a river, it gives life, but its current is fierce. If you pour too much, it drags you under. So I'm dying slowly. Not if you learn to anchor it. The bond with the king may help." Lyra closed her eyes. "Everything comes back to that bond." Marwen smiled sadly. "Because destiny rarely works alone." Days passed as the palace rebuilt. Soldiers repaired the walls, servants replaced shattered glass. Lyra regained strength quickly, though strange dreams haunted her, visions of a vast white wolf standing beside a crimson moon, watching her silently. When she returned to the courtyard, Kale was there sparring with Ronan. Sweat gleamed on his skin, his movements were precise, deadly. When he saw her, he lowered his blade. "You should still be resting." "I heal fast," she said. He studied her face. "You look better. And you look worse." She nodded at the bandage on his arm. "You fought while bleeding. I've fought through worse. That's not comforting." He smiled faintly. "Then don't let me comfort you." They fell into quiet for a moment, the air heavy with things neither wanted to say. Finally she asked, "Did you know the veil could use shadow as solid?" "I've heard legends," Kale said. "He was born when the goddess split her power, light to the moonborn, darkness to her first son. He turned it into hunger." Lyra shivered. "And he wants it back." "Maybe not just the power," Kale said softly. "Maybe the goddess herself." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He met her eyes. "He called you her vessel. If that's true, he might try to draw her out through you." Lyra's stomach knotted. "Then we can't let him." "No," Kale agreed, "we can't." That evening, the court gathered in the restored hall. The nobles murmured nervously, glancing at Lyra with new fear and awe. When Kale entered, silence fell. "The attack last night proved what we face," he said. "The veil wants the moonborn dead. We stand as her shield. Any pack that betrays that oath will answer to me." He turned to Lyra. "And you, healer, will you stand with us still?" She rose, her voice steady though her heart raced. "I will. Until the last shadow falls." The hall echoed with a cheer that felt half prayer, half defiance. Later, after the feast, Kale found her in the moonlit corridor outside the hall. "You spoke well. You forced me to." "True," he admitted. "But you didn't falter." She smiled. "Neither did you." He stepped closer. "Lyra, when you fell last night, I thought," he stopped himself, jaw tightening. "It doesn't matter. You're alive." She looked up at him, reading what he didn't say. "I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered. "Good," he said. "Because this war is far from over." The next days were restless. Scouts returned with fragments of news. The Veil's army was growing, gathering creatures from beyond the borderlands. Kale prepared for siege, the city trained day and night. Lyra spent her hours between the temple and the gardens, learning control. The seedling had grown into a small tree now, its trunk pale as bone, its leaves silver blue. When she meditated near it, she could feel the pulse of every living thing around her, the wolves in the city, the birds in the towers, even the slow heartbeat of the earth. But each session left her dizzy. Power was no longer trickling, it was pouring, and she could barely hold it. One afternoon, as sunlight slanted through the leaves, a whisper brushed her thoughts. Lyra. She stiffened. Who's there? The voice was calm, soft, yet filled with weight. Child of the moon, the balance wavers. Light alone cannot save them. She closed her eyes. Are you the goddess? I am the memory of her, the voice said. Her echo lives in you. The veil is what remains of her sorrow. Lyra's heart pounded. Then how do I stop him? You must learn both halves, light and shadow. Only balance can end the cycle. The connection broke, leaving her gasping. She looked down at her hands. For a heartbeat, her light flickered dark at the edges. That night she told Cale what she'd heard. They met in the map chamber, candles burning low. She spoke to you, he asked. Or something that remembers her, Lyra said. She said light alone can't win. That I need both sides. Cale frowned. The veil uses shadow. That's his domain. Maybe that's why she said it. He shook his head. If you touch darkness, it might consume you. I've already seen what happens when we ignore it, she said softly. The shadows find us anyway. He hesitated, torn. You're not trained for that kind of power. I wasn't trained for any of this, she said. But I'm still here. Finally he sighed. Then we do it carefully. No secret experiments. You try nothing without me near. Lyra smiled faintly. Protective, aren't you? Cautious, he corrected. I've already lost too much. Days turned to nights filled with preparation. Cale led strategy councils. Lyra studied with Marwen, learning the old balance rituals. They trained together in the courtyard, light and steel moving in rhythm. He taught her how to read attack, how to move as a fighter rather than a healer. She taught him the patience of stillness. Between lessons, quiet moments slipped through. A shared laugh. A glance that lingered too long. The bond between them grew until it hummed beneath every word. Then, one night, the sky turned crimson again. A messenger arrived half dead from the eastern road. The veil moves, he gasped. He marches with an army of shadow and flame. 2 nights, maybe less. Cale dismissed the man and turned to Lyra. It's happening. She nodded. Then we face it together. He reached out, brushing his fingers lightly against her wrist where the mark gleamed. Stay alive, he said quietly. You too. The palace prepared for war. Banners came down, replaced by shields. The moon tree in Lyra's chamber pulsed brighter each hour, as if sensing what was coming. That night, when she stood at her window, the goddess's voice whispered again. When darkness rises, do not fight it. Shape it. Lyra closed her eyes. Then teach me. The air around her thickened, silver light flared, threaded with streaks of shadow. Pain tore through her chest. She gasped and then saw through the moon's eyes. Fields of approaching darkness, a figure cloaked in mist commanding legions. The veil raised his head as though he could feel her gaze. Soon, little light, his voice echoed in her mind. We'll see which of us the moon truly loved. Lyra jolted awake on the floor, drenched in sweat. Outside, the first drums of war began to beat. The final battle was coming, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She rose, looked at the glowing tree, and whispered, "Let them come." The night came silver and scarlet, moonlight mingling with fire from the horizon. Lyra stood on the highest wall of Moonspire Palace, her cloak snapping in the wind. Far beyond the plains, an army of shadows moved like a living sea. Torches burned red among them. The earth itself trembled beneath their march. Below her, Cale's army waited. Banners whipped. Wolves shifted restlessly, half men, half beasts, their armor shining faintly under the moon. Drums pounded like heartbeats. Cale stood at the front in black armor, a silver wolf emblazoned across his chest. When he looked up toward the walls, their eyes met. He didn't need to speak. She knew his thoughts as if they were her own. If this is the end, we end it together. Priestess Marwen's voice rose behind her, chanting the moon's blessing. The air thickened with power. The moon tree on the balcony glowed brighter, its branches spilling silver dust that drifted through the sky. Each flake touched a soldier's armor and shimmered like a blessing. Lyra placed her hands on the cold stone. Light rippled outward, thin streams of silver threading down through the walls and into the army below. The soldiers gasped as warmth coursed through them, steadying fear, mending bruises before they even began. Cale raised his sword. "For the Moonborn," he roared. 1,000 voices answered, echoing through the valley. The Vale's army responded with a roar of their own, deep and monstrous. Then the world broke into motion. The first wave hit like thunder, shadow beasts leaping from the dark. The palace's defenses flared with Lyra's light, but the impact rocked the ground. Cale led his front line forward, blade cutting through mist and claw. Each time his sword struck, silver sparks burst like stars. Lyra stood her ground on the wall, guiding her power into the barriers. Every breath burned her chest, every pulse drew more energy from her core. Still she pushed harder, pouring light into the soldiers below. A shadow creature reached the ramparts, scaling the stones. Lyra turned and struck it with a blast of energy. It shrieked and disintegrated, leaving ash on the wind. She heard Cale's voice faintly through the din, "Hold the line," but then the air changed, colder, sharper. The Vale appeared at the center of his army, surrounded by whirling darkness. His form was clearer now, half solid, half smoke, wearing armor that bled shadows. In one hand, he held a spear made of black crystal. He raised it toward the sky. The moonlight dimmed. Clouds thickened, turning crimson. "No," Lyra whispered. The shadows surged, swallowing the outer battlements. Soldiers fell. For a moment the world tilted toward chaos. Cale fought his way toward the Vale, cutting down creature after creature, but they kept reforming around him. "Lyra," he shouted. "We need light." Lyra closed her eyes. Her power flared too fast, too much. The mark on her wrist blazed like molten silver. She felt her body shake, but she didn't stop. Light poured from her palms in wide arcs, slicing through the darkness. The sky split. The moon burst free from the clouds, shining blindingly bright. For one perfect instant, it seemed the light would win. Then the Vale laughed. He drove his spear into the ground. A wave of black energy erupted, smashing against the light like a storm. Lyra staggered as the force struck her, the power in her veins twisting. She screamed, silver and shadow colliding inside her chest. "Lyra!" Cale's voice was raw. He saw her fall from the wall, light scattering like sparks. Without hesitation he leapt after her, catching her just before she hit the stones. Her eyes fluttered open, glowing faintly, the mark on her wrist pulsing like a heartbeat gone wild. "Don't move," he said. "You've done enough." Her voice was barely a whisper. "It's not enough." His drawing from the moon itself. Cale looked up. The Vale was holding his spear high, its tip drinking the light from the sky. The moon dimmed further, bleeding red. "If he takes it," Cale said, "there will be nothing left." Lyra's fingers tightened weakly around his arm. "Then I have to take it back." "No," he snapped. "You'll die. Then so will he." Before he could stop her, she pushed free, rising shakily. Light gathered around her feet, lifting her off the ground. The air hummed. Every silver thread from the army below turned toward her, flowing into her body. Her hair streamed like liquid light, her eyes burning bright as stars. "Goddess, guide me," she whispered. Cale reached for her, but she was already rising toward the sky. The Vale's laughter turned sharp. "You'd burn the world to prove her love." Lyra spread her hands. "No. I'll heal what you broke." Light exploded from her, colliding with his storm. The sky filled with fire and silver rain. Soldiers on both sides fell to their knees as the air screamed. The clash lasted forever, or maybe only a heartbeat. When it ended, silence rolled over the battlefield. The Vale's spear shattered, fragments dissolving like smoke. He staggered back, body flickering. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You can't kill what was born from the goddess's grief." Lyra hovered above him, every breath labored. "Then I'll forgive what she couldn't." She reached out. Light poured from her hand, wrapping around him. For an instant, his features softened, anger turning to sorrow. Then he vanished, leaving only fading shadows. The sky cleared. The moon shone silver again. Lyra drifted downward, landing softly in the courtyard. Kale was there before her feet touched the ground, catching her as she swayed. "It's over," he murmured. "No," she said faintly. "It's beginning." Her eyes rolled back. The light in her veins dimmed, and she collapsed. Kale held her close, calling her name, but she didn't answer. They carried her to the temple. Ma Wen worked in silence, weaving runes of silver around her bed. Kale refused to leave her side. Hours passed. Lyra lay pale and still, her pulse faint. When Ma Wen finally looked up, her expression was grave. "She's not dying. She's changing." Kale's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" The light fused with her blood. "She carries the moon's core now. If she wakes, she'll be something more than moonborn. And if she doesn't, then the goddess sleeps forever with her." Kale gripped Lyra's hand. "Wake up," he whispered. "You promised to live." The palace slept under a sky washed clean by rain. Smoke drifted from the battlefield beyond the walls, but the air was quiet for the first time in months. The war was over. Kale stood on the balcony outside the temple, exhaustion shadowing his face. He watched the sunrise and tried not to look at the closed door behind him. Every heartbeat felt like waiting. Ronan approached quietly. "The soldiers ask if they should hold a ceremony." "Not yet," Kale said. "Not until she wakes." Ronan nodded and withdrew. When Kale turned back toward the door, he froze. A faint glow shone through the cracks, soft, silvery, pulsing like breath. He pushed the door open. Lyra was sitting upright, light spilling from her skin in gentle waves. Her eyes opened, no longer just silver, but rimmed with pale gold. "Kale," she whispered. He crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt beside her. "You're here." "I think so," she said, voice hoarse. "Where's the veil?" "Gone. The army scattered when he fell." She exhaled shakily. "I thought I'd never see morning again." "You almost didn't," he said, and for the first time his voice cracked. "Don't do that to me again." Lyra smiled faintly. "I'll try not to defeat any ancient darkness alone next time." He laughed softly, half relief, half disbelief. "I'll hold you to that." She reached out and touched his cheek. "You look older." "I feel it," he admitted. "Every time you scare me, I age a year." Her laughter was weak but real. Then she looked around. The walls shimmered faintly where her light touched them. "What happens now?" "You rest. The kingdom rebuilds." She shook her head. "That's not what I mean. The goddess spoke through me, Kale. The balance isn't finished. Light and shadow aren't enemies, they're halves of one thing. If we rebuild only in light, the darkness will rise again." He studied her. "Then teach us how to keep the balance." "I don't know how yet," she admitted. "But I can learn." He smiled faintly. "Then so will we." In the weeks that followed, the palace changed. The moon tree grew in the courtyard, its branches spreading wide. From its roots flowed clear water that healed wounds faster than any potion. The people began calling it the heart of the moon. Lyra spent her days tending the wounded and teaching the priests to balance light with shadow. Her power no longer burned her, it flowed like steady breath. The silver mark on her wrist now held a twin streak of black, a reminder that she carried both sides of the goddess within her. Kale ruled beside her, his once iron commands tempered by her calm. The nobles learned to listen. The Pax sent envoys not to demand, but to offer allegiance. Peace, fragile and beautiful, began to grow. One night, Lyra stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The moon shone clear, unscarred. Kale joined her quietly. He wore no crown tonight, only a simple tunic, his hand resting lightly on the hilt at his side out of habit. "You should sleep," she said. "So should you," he replied. "I don't feel tired anymore," she admitted. "Just awake. That's what peace feels like. We forget how loud it is." They stood together in silence for a while. Then Kale said softly, "When I first found you in that forest, you told me you were barren. That you couldn't carry life." She smiled faintly. "And now I carry too much of it." "Maybe that was the goddess's trick," he said. "She made the barren one the mother of balance." Lyra turned to him. You always speak like a poet when you're too tired to be a king. He smiled. Maybe I'm allowed that now. The wind stirred her hair. For a long time neither spoke. Then Lyra said quietly, the prophecy, it spoke of 2 heartbeats. 1 light, 1 shadow. Kale nodded. And we've both carried pieces of each. She looked down at her hands. Then maybe that was it all along. The goddess didn't mean 2 children. She meant 2 souls. His hand brushed hers, steady and warm. If that's true, then the prophecy's fulfilled. She smiled. Or maybe it's just beginning again. He squeezed her hand. Then whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Below, the city lights shimmered like stars fallen to earth. Wolves howled in harmony with the night wind. The moon hung full and bright above them, and for the first time in centuries, its light held no shadow. Lyra leaned her head on Kale's shoulder. The goddess is quiet tonight. Kale wrapped an arm around her. Maybe she finally rests. Lyra closed her eyes. Then let her sleep. We'll keep the balance for her. The dawn broke gold and silver, painting the rebuilt spires in light. The heart of the moon tree gleamed in the courtyard, its branches heavy with glowing fruit. From them new seedlings would one day grow, symbols of the peace forged in fire. And somewhere deep in the quiet beyond, where gods dream and stars remember, the goddess smiled. And that was just the beginning of Lyra's legend under the twin moons. If her journey stirred something in you, the light, the darkness, or the balance in between, don't just fade into the shadows. Hit that like, subscribe, and bell so you never miss the next chapter of this world we're building together. Drop your thoughts below, tell me what moment hit you hardest, and what you think happens next. Because in this story, every comment shapes the next moonrise.